Many religious scripts hold a moral obligation to provide care for orphans, widows, and other marginalized groups in their communities. Their religious traditions, they recognize the inherent dignity of every person and has a fundamental belief in the dignity of the child. They emphasize the family as the best place for bringing up children, and they have a holistic notion of the child and a comprehensive understanding of children's physical, emotional, social, and spiritual needs. Religious communities are often in a favorable position to provide care for the most disadvantaged, as they are localized in remote areas, and they have access to deprived groups in a way that CSOs and governments may not. Also, they hold a moral influence and have an extensive network, which make them important change makers in their context. Faith communities have globally taken a lead in providing care for disadvantaged children who are deprived of parental care. The form of care has often been in the form of residential care through orphanages, institutions, and children's centers. The institutionalization of children by faith communities has been done out of compassion in a time where residential care was accepted and where there was no alternative. But times are changing. Globally today, it's estimated that there are approximately 153 million children who have lost a mother or a father. 17.8 million of them have lost both parents. That means that it's only 11% that don't have any living parents. UNICEF estimates that 2.2 million children live in orphanages. Depending on the region, 50 to 90% of the children living in institutions have one or both parents alive. A study in Ghana found that 80 to 90% of the families could, with some support, have provided care for their children. This means that poverty, not lack of caregivers, often is the reason for placing children in orphanages. Parents who cannot provide for the children often feel compelled to use orphanages to address immediate problems. The pull factors for residential care are many: poverty, illness in the family, separation among parents, death of a parent, inability to provide education, abuse in the family, or neglect. With time, we have learned that residential care potential can be harmful. As a long-term solution, orphanages cannot replace the loving care of a family, and too often fail to meet the social, emotional, cognitive, and development needs of children and youth. For children in emergency situations where there are no other means of support, it may be a help to have a rehabilitative and transitional care in institutions. However, research shows that nurturing family environments are associated with positive outcomes for children's development. A family is able to provide a child with love, a sense of belonging, and a lifelong connection with a community of people. Within families, children have a sense of a shared history. They learn important social skills, and it helps them to interact with people and manage life challenges. However, many faith communities continue to run residential care for children, despite the global development and vital knowledge on the potential damage that it can cause. Taking into consideration that most children living in institutions have one or both parents alive, and that poverty-related causes are the main pull factors for child separation, it is time for faith communities to discuss and reconsider their way of responding to the needs of disadvantaged children. Alternative care promotes 3 strategies. First of all, they look into how they can reunify children with their biological families. Secondly, they look into placement of children in a wider kinship or foster care. And finally, they look into preventive strategies of how they can avoid separation between children and their parents. Essential for the alternative care agenda is also for institutions to surpass from permanent residential care to temporary residential care. And today we will look into these issues in depth, and we will learn from experience where Viva, they have for several years worked with this transition from permanent residential care to temporary residential care. Another important issue that we will cover today is the freedom of religion and belief for children in institutional and foster care. What rights do children hold in terms of having and practicing a belief? And what obligations do caregivers in institutions and foster care parents have towards the children in relation to their rights to freedom of religion and belief? Yes, so we have an exciting program ahead of us. And before we go into the presentations from Viva, first of all, Chrissy Gale, Dr. Chrissy Gale, she will present the International Resolution and Framework. And Dr. Chrissy Gale, she is an international child protection consultant with specialism in child protection systems and alternative care. She holds a doctorate from the University of Bristol, and she is an associate of the Alice Solomon Hoch School University, Berlin. She has a long career working with CELSIS, UNICEF, Family for Every Child, and she will introduce us to the UN resolution on alternative care. Thank you very much, Chrissy.
Thank you, Annika, and thank you for that very comprehensive introduction. First and foremost, I'm going to talk about the UN resolution, as Annika just mentioned. And in fact, on the 30th anniversary of the adoption of the Convention of the Rights of the Child, it was decided by the UN General Assembly to develop a new UN resolution. This is the UN resolution that was passed on the 12th of November 2019, which is called the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of the Child. And it was unanimously adopted. That word is very difficult. And what was really great for us and what was very, very exciting was the fact that this resolution could have been about anything on this 30th anniversary. It could have been right to education, right to health. But in fact, we were delighted through a lot of advocacy, through international networks, that this resolution was now based on children, a focus on children without parental care and those at risk of being so. So who is responsible for implementing this resolution? Well, we all are. Everyone is. Obviously communities and families, but in terms of organizations, the state takes an overall responsibility, but also UN bodies, donors, national, international NGOs, CBOs. Also very much important today is faith-based organizations and also private enterprises. We should all work together to take equal responsibility under the guidance of the state to implement this resolution. I just want to highlight a couple of things in the resolution that I think we will be probably thinking about today, and that is the necessity and the suitability principles. And this UN resolution reflects the UN guidelines for the alternative care of children. Within the UN guidelines, we talk about the necessity principle, and that means there should always be rigorous and systematic procedures, as we heard Annika talk about, to make sure that alternative care is only for after careful consideration. It should always be only decided upon if it's in the best interest of the child. We believe strongly internationally that this should be about protection. This is not about some of the vulnerabilities that we've just heard about, which are related to poverty, which we think and we know we can address rather than placing children in care. And I'll talk about that in the next slide. But most particularly what this resolution says and what the UN guidelines say is that all decisions should be made on a case-by-case basis by qualified professionals in multidisciplinary teams through a judicial, administrative, or other adequate and recognized procedure with legal safeguards. What that means is that as organizations, we must work within the framework of the state law, the legislation, and the judicial procedures when decisions are being made, legal decisions are being made about placing children in care. And if those legal procedures don't exist, then they should be established within a country. The suitability principle means that the best quality care that is most suitable for the individual child should be chosen. And what's most important is, regardless of which organization or UN body or any other agency that we come from, we are all bound by this guidance and by the articles in this UN resolution. And I just want to pick on two things that actually you've already heard Annika say. One of the most important focuses of this UN resolution that we all hold responsibility for is prevention of family separation in the first instance. And those multi-dimensional aspects that are causes and results of poverty, including stigma, discrimination, and social exclusion, whether based on race, religion, gender, and all other reasons why people may be discriminated against, these should never be the reasons why children are removed from parental care. They must never be the reasons why we, if we are care providers, receive children into our care. And they must never stop us from preventing children to return to their families. As you heard Annika said, these are things that we should be tackling, and the UN resolution especially focuses on this. Interestingly enough, we heard Annika also talk about the issue of orphanages. There are very different data, very different information, and we don't have a lot of accurate data on the number of children, unfortunately, across the world. We still have estimations. But in some cases, we have seen approximations of between 90 and 95% of children who are in institutional or other care are not orphans. And by orphans, we usually mean have lost both parents through death. And international treaty terminology now refers to institutions, not orphanages. And that's a very important message, I think, for everyone, including faith-based organizations, not only those that provide care, but might also be raising funds for different forms of care. So in particular, what role can faith-based organizations play? Well, faith-based organizations have an important standing in the community. They have a voice in the community. We know that people listen to faith-based organizations and faith-based leaders. And therefore, we believe they have a very, within the treaty and the discussions around the use of the treaty of this UN resolution, we believe that faith-based organizations can play a very important role in promoting this new UN resolution, but also other UN resolutions and guidelines on alternative care. We have international conversations around the importance of faith-based organizations being advocate for the change, both change within their own organizations, but also advocating this information of organizations around them, so that they shift the focus from the use of alternative care when not necessary to prevention of family separation, to using suitable family-based, which we understand from the UN guidelines as foster care, and community-based residential care, which is small-scale residential care based in the community. And as we also heard from Annika say, family reunification as quickly as possible. We also know that faith-based organizations play a very, very strong role in raising funds. And so we also believe that faith-based organizations taking these UN resolutions can really promote the idea that individuals who are raising money or are giving money understand the UN resolution, understand the guidelines, understand child rights, and understand what good practice is. So thank you very much for this short introduction. There are many other things in the UN resolution, but those are ones that I particularly felt might be relevant to our discussions today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chrissy Gale. Now we will have 3 presentations from the global organization VIVA. First of all, Britt Holm Hederhus, the National Director of VIVA Denmark. She will give a presentation. Afterwards, Philip Aspergreen, who is the Executive Director at Casa Viva in Costa Rica, will also give a presentation. And finally, Maria Luna, who is the Director of Viva Honduras, will give us a very interesting presentation. And now I will give the word to Britt.
Thank you, Annika. Thank you for the invitation, for joining today. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. I just uploaded my presentation, and first of all, I would like to start showing you a a short film that was made some years ago. It was a film about Eric, who was at the age of 15 reintegrated with his family.
Yo lo que pensaba era que no tenía mamá, que no tenía hermanos.
Solo me puse le dije a mi papá que me lo cuidara para yo trabajar. Como él ha sido bien grosero, le pegaba mucho.
Lo que más recuerdo es cuando me maltrataban con eso.
A la profesora le miró el lomito, entonces vino y lo denunció. Entonces se lo quitaron. Sí, no, cuando uno no tiene un hijo y no sabe dónde está, uno se siente triste. Porque no sabe a dónde está, ni sea como perdido.
Crecer por un niño era bonito. Sí, ahí le daban todo. Lo que sabía de mi mamá, nada. Me afectaba en mi carácter. Mi carácter era muy fuerte.
Él es un pastor y de seguro se iba allá a la iglesia y se comenzó de seguro a ver ahí y se dio cuenta que ahí estaba él. Entonces ahí sí me lo enseñaron. Entonces fue alegría para mí.
Yo sí me alegraba de ver a mi mamá y mi mamá sí se alegraba de ver a mí.
No, alegre me sentía, porque él estaba aquí ya junto. Tengo mis hijos, los 3 hijos que tengo.
Mi familia la veo más feliz, con más relación. Antes era triste, yo no sonreía antes, no era feliz. Y ahora ya puedo sonreír.
This film shows the essence of how we work with deinstitutionalization and reintegration of children today in Viva Denmark. I remember the first time I saw this film, I was overwhelmed because it is a touching story in itself, but to me it also showed that there had been changes in the way we work, because it was initiated by the orphanage that they were looking for they put up the search for his biological family, and the pastor and the church took part in the active part in a reintegration of the child coming back to his family. And all these small things are, a lot of work has been behind those small changes, because we need to change the mindset of the stakeholders working with the institutionalized children. So for me, this film has a very important message. But just for all of you who doesn't know anything about Viva, I shortly will present you to our organization. We are an independent church-based child right organization. We work as a part of the global network Viva Together for Children, which works in 28 countries. Viva Denmark. In Viva Denmark, we have a strong commitment in Zimbabwe, the Philippines, and in Central America, primarily in Honduras, which is also the country we mainly will be focusing on today. Viva work with local churches, church-based organizations, and civil society organizations. Since the beginning, 28 years ago, the relationship and collaboration with orphanages have been a strong component in our work. Our focus has mostly been on youth aged 15 to 18 who are in the transition to life outside the orphanage. This means that transition processes always has been central part of our activities with the orphanages. About 7 years ago, we changed our strategy and integrated alternative care agenda in all our programs. how did we start? What was the starting point for the change strategy? We started asking ourselves, what is the best interest of the child? And what is the best interest of the child with the knowledge that we have today and not 20 years ago? It sounds easy. It sounds like something we should always have been doing. That's the thinking we should have been doing from the beginning. But it sounds easy, but it is quite complicated, because we work with or against a system where the main stakeholders benefit from keeping status quo. And I will get back to that later. But just to go on with what Viva actually started after having this new approach for working with institutionalized children. We started in 2016 a regional innovative learning project on the institutionalization of children's homes and roadmap for private-public partnership, taking place both in Nicaragua and Honduras. But we actually quite quickly learned that it was very difficult to work in Nicaragua with transition because of political situation and also children's homes being a little bit scared to enter to these processes. But in Honduran, authorities were far more accommodating in terms of cooperation, also due to Maria Luna and Phil's hard work. And in 2018, we started one more program in Honduras called Toward Family-Based Care. Our experiences in relation to funding has been that we found that institutional funding for the orphanages is difficult to get, even when it is put in an obvious development perspective, because it is still seen as a service delivery. We had funding from CKU, and maybe because they have a lot of experience working with church-based organizations, they see the potential for change needed in this area, and we got the funding for our programs with the CKU. But generally, I think this is an area with a lot of private funding. It is quite easy to fundraise for orphanages, and that's also something that keep us on the same track and make it a little bit difficult to change path working with institutionalized children. The role of the church and the role of the West, because they are, of course, interconnected. Talking about orphanages, the church has a strong and important voice. Many orphanages have been started by churches, and that means that there are very strong, long-lasting bond between them. Historically, the church has played an important role. It took on responsibility for vulnerable and sick children when no one else did. In many cases, the children lived in remote areas where no social worker or authorities were present, but the churches were present, and they responded to the need of these children in what at that time seemed to be the best way. Today, we know that we need to do more and we need to do better, and the progressive churches get that message. But we are dealing with, in some cases, lifelong commitments to a specific orphanage, a bond that can be difficult to break. I say historically, but actually in many cases, the situation had not changed that much over the years because the circumstances have not changed that much. Looking and evaluating the role of the church, we also need to bring our attention towards the states that keeps assigning children to the orphanages, making sure that the system continues. Finally, there's a strong incentive to maintain this existing system. And that is why it is difficult to work with the perspective of having the child's best interest in mind. On one side, we have the government, the authorities, because they generally are underfunded in these countries, and the help from, in this case, in Latin America, the help from donors and churches means that they have one less challenge to address. We have the orphanages on the other side. They can continue their work with the funding, responding to the needs of children, and these needs are real and continue to exist. So they keep responding to the needs, and they keep responding to the fact that they continue to get children assigned to the orphanages. And then we have the donors, who in many cases are churches which for decades have learned that supporting orphanages is a part of the church DNA. These donations are an important part of keeping the system alive, making sure that the wheel continues to rotate. And none of these stakeholders have, from their perspective, reason to change strategy. That means that we are the ones who need to change strategy, and we need to change the narrative. And that was why I wanted to start by showing you the short film. Changing the narrative is needed, and it is our maybe the biggest contribution at this point, that we need to do that. And it's difficult, and it's difficult to change. It's difficult to create a new narrative. And in Viva Denmark, we have had a lot of experience now and trying to find out how we can change this narrative, because talking about UN resolutions that we need to live up to the UN resolutions, we need to make it more direct communication to our funders, our donors, and that's difficult. And even though we have worked with this for quite some years now in Viva Denmark, we are still referred to as the organization who works with orphanages, because the image is so difficult and the narrative is so difficult to change. Yes, and also the thing about changing the narrative is also about doing it in respect for the people who actually have been, maybe for over 30 years, been donating money for orphanages, and it comes from a good place. And we need to be respectful in how we change the narrative, also because of these long commitments. I think it could be nice to have it on, because afterwards Phil from Casa Viva will talk, and later Maria Luna, and they are our partners in this setup and our approach to working with institutionalized children in Latin America. So it could also be a starting point for their presentations.
Que sí, sí puede ser. Volvamos con nuestro papá.
Me hace sentir muy feliz de volver a estar con mi padre.
Me le detectan el problema que ella tiene un tumor canceroso en la matriz. Cuando ella murió, yo me enfoqué solo en lo de mis niños. Yo no pensé otra cosa más que en luchar por mis hijos a como a mí me tocara. Soy muy cariñoso con mis hijos y yo no me los quería despegar. Hasta que ya por último vi que se me hacía imposible. Habían veces que yo me salía de trabajo de construcción, no hallaba quien me cuidara a los niños, perdí el trabajo. Mire, para mí fue lo más difícil.
Yo lo único que recuerdo es que cuando mi papá nos fue a dejar, estábamos llorando y nos colgamos de su faja.
Uno metió la mano por aquí en mi faja y el otro por el otro lado. Y me decían, papi, no los deje aquí, pero llorando, en grito. Papi, no los deje. Me
acuerdo cuando mi papá salió caminando. Eso me recuerdo.
Cuando salí a la calle, yo no sabía cuál era el camino que yo iba a agarrar. Por mis hijos he dado todo. Durante 5 años, yo los visité todos los domingos.
Mi padre siempre estaba al pendiente de todo porque nos iba a visitar todos los domingos, ya que estábamos pequeños.
Que es muy probable que regresemos.
Significa mucho porque mi papá ha estado luchando siempre.
La institución me planteó de que mis hijos podían regresar a la casa, pues para mí ha sido algo bueno, porque en realidad yo con mis 2 niños, pues todo ha continuado bien porque yo no he dejado de estar ahí con ellos. Pero nunca es igual como que ellos estén con uno.
We will now give the floor to you, Philip.
Thank you very much, Annika and Christina, the CKU, and my friends at Viva, and all of the people that have organized this event. It's a privilege for me to be here today. So I'm going to begin sharing my screen here as well, and just talk a little bit about the church's role in moving children to families. Just to give you a little bit of my story, I'm from the United States. I'm a Christian, and my family and I moved to the Dominican Republic in 1997 to pursue what we called the beautiful orphanage dream. And it is such a beautiful dream that is an orphanage. We heard about, Annika, those 153 million children that you talked about who UNICEF were touting as being orphaned at the time. And it seemed like, my goodness, there's so many of them. We could just move to the Dominican. We could take a butterfly net and just scoop up these children, bring them to our home, and build a beautiful orphanage in the country. And so that's what we did for 6 years. My wife and I and the people that we were working with built orphanages in the Dominican Republic. The dream was not as beautiful as what we originally thought that it would be. And in 2003, we moved to Costa Rica, and we began developing a program that we call Casa Viva in partnership with the Viva Network. And Casa Viva is an organization that connects children to families. We have individual families in Costa Rica that open their doors and receive one child to live among them. And so we're just weeks away from placing our 1,000th child in a Costa Rican family through Casa Viva. So today I'm going to be talking about the role of the church in the deinstitutionalization of children, but I have just 3 things I want to say about that word deinstitutionalization. Ugh. It's an ugly word that I do not like. And so I'm going to, it tells us what we don't want to do, but nobody actually wants to institutionalize children. That's not what we set out to do. It's what happens in the way. But so I'm going to change the name. I'm going to call it the role of the church in connecting children to families, because that's the solution. That's what we do want to be doing. It's finding ways to get children connected to families, biological families, extended families, alternative families, be they fostering or adoption. So that's what we're doing. And it's important to look at the history, and Annika, you mentioned some of this, but it is important to note that historically, the church was known for caring for vulnerable children. When we look at the early church, we see that church was literally known by both the Christian historians and the secular historians for their work with vulnerable populations. And they would bring those children into their homes, all right? The orphanage as a concept is rather new. It wasn't until around 1850 that the orphanages really started to pick up steam. So they really only have about 200 years of history to be involved in. But again, it's important to note it was in the church that was on the forefront of developing that hip and innovative and new model of caring for children, because they were looking for, during the Industrial Revolution, ways to care for the large numbers of vulnerable children that were created through the poor working conditions of the Industrial Revolution. But it's new, it's not old. Today, maybe there are 2 to 8 million children living in orphanages worldwide, depending on if you're talking to UNICEF or talking to people that are making the estimates. But it's important to remember a couple of things. First, the church has been engaged where the governments are not engaged, and that still is happening today. We're seeing countries where there might be 4 government-run orphanages and as many as 250 private orphanages. This is in a Latin American country, and that's primarily religious organizations, Christian and Protestant and Catholic children's homes. So the church has been engaged where the government has not been engaged. It's also important to note that not all children's homes are equal, and not all children's homes are evil. I have been in very difficult homes. Maria Luna and I visited a home that was had 600 children living on the campus. There was a large cafeteria built for 1,000 children. Kids walked in single file lines from building to building. There were no house parents. There were guards that walked around and looked at the homes at night. They pushed wooden carts around with huge pots filled with slop that they put in the kids' bowls. It was an institution. And the long-term impact of the kids living in those homes was very difficult. The director told me, I can count on one hand the number of children that have come out well from this children's home. But still, he continued to do that same model. All right. At the same time that you have homes like that, there's a home that has 23 girls with an older couple that treats them like daughters. These are two different places. The success rate of those places is different. And so we need to realize that before we can do something different, we have to create something new. And the third thing I'll mention is that the church has implemented and is implementing the best model that they know. We've unfortunately exported that beautiful orphanage dream around the world. I was in Arequipa, Peru, meeting with a group of 11 pastors of local Peruvian pastors. Those pastors, leaders in their community, 9 of the 11 were either currently building a children's home or had plans to build a children's home in the future, because we've exported that dream. It seems so pure, it seems so right. Pure religion is this, caring for orphans and widows. We make the jump, caring for orphans is equal to building an orphanage. That's the only way that people know how to do that. And so we do have an incredible opportunity in front of us as the church, and that is to develop new models of caring for children and make them as attractive and appealing as the beautiful orphanage dream has become and as it's captured the imagination of other people. So today I want to talk briefly about the way that I want to share with you 4 different examples and stories, how different organizations are transitioning the types of care that they're giving. The first one that I'll share with is our model. In Casa Viva, we began as a new startup in Costa Rica. We did not have an orphanage when we came here, so we started from the ground up. And the way that our model works, it's based in local churches. Those local churches have a role of recruiting families from their populations, their congregations, who can engage on behalf of children. Our NGO has a team of professionals, of psychologists and social workers that trains and prepares those families and works closely with the local government and in partnership. And the local government validates the needs of the kids that are coming to our program and places those children. We work together to place those children into the foster families that we have available. Those foster families act in a short-term type program. It's important to note, church, government, NGO, working together, each fulfilling a different role in the model. And that's 4 of our key principles for working with children in our model. Engage local churches in a real way, care for children in families, pursue national sustainability, and then pursue the best long-term option for each child. I want to just look briefly at that long-term option, because for us, every child that comes into our program, is starting short-term, saying this will be a short-term solution for you until we find your best alternative in the spectrum of care alternatives. And for us, that starts with biological family reunification. What would it take to make the changes necessary for this child to move back and live with mom or dad? And if not, an extended family. Is there a grandma or grandpa, an uncle or an aunt, or an older sibling that would be willing to take this child? If that's not possible, then we make a big shift. We pursue a declaration of abandonment so that the child can be adopted. Next, we move towards long-term foster care as a better alternative. And finally, we consider a children's home as our long-term best solution. In the history of Casa Viva, Because we've tried doing this, because we've asked the question, would it be possible to see children cared for in families? Of the nearly 1,000 children that have come into our program, less than 2% of them have had to have, we've not been able to provide a family solution to, and they've ended up in a children's home long-term. Because we've engaged churches, because we've engaged families. So I want to talk a little bit about how children's homes can expand their services to include families. Because one of the crucial actors in the church are the NGOs that are religious and faith-based that are implementing programs for children. And so to talk about that, I want to start by talking about a major paradigm shift that needs to take place. Children's homes around the world need to stop saying that they are an orphanage, that they are a children's home. The directors need to stop saying, I work for an orphanage, and they need to start saying, I work in a program that acts in the best interest of children. When we're able to make that subtle shift from saying what we do is build orphanages to say what we do is care for children well, we're able to be open to implementing many types of different programs for the children that come into our care. And so it's an important paradigm shift that has to take place. And oftentimes when I present, a discussion erupts. The orphanage directors want to defend the orphanage that they've built and developed. But when we can stop and say, what's the purpose of the orphanage? Why are we doing that? How can we accomplish that same purpose of caring for children well, better through other models? We're able to implement different types of care. As I was working in the Dominican Republic, as I moved there out of a background of working in business in the United States, I realized looking back that I made two fundamental errors. I answered two questions incorrectly. The first question was this: who is this child that's coming into our program? My original thought was, these are true orphans that have no one, and they come to us as a blank slate, and their life starts when they arrive at our orphanage. It was a terrible error. And so the nice thing about me is I can talk about institutionalization and the well-intentioned people who do the wrong things, because that was me. All right. So I'm not talking bad about other people. I'm talking bad about me. That was my understanding. But who is this child? So my thought was true orphans. No, our experience was what Chrissy mentioned. 95% of the children in our program had biological parents that wanted to visit them on the campuses. And then my second thought was, these children, their life will start fresh when they come to our campus. But no, the reality is all of them come with significant traumas that they've experienced, abuses, neglect, just the separation from their family and coming to live at an orphanage was another trauma that these children had to experience. So this misunderstanding of who the child was a significant thing. And then that led to my second error, which was answering the question, what does this child need? What we focused on in the children's home, because when you have a group of 60 children living on your campus, you have to focus on logistics. You have to focus on food and making sure you've got the staff there to cover the programs. You've got to focus on activities and education and the bus and keeping things going. And of course, the work teams that are visiting because they're going to bring the funds. Our focus was in the wrong place. We weren't focused on the true needs of children. What do children really need? Children need connection. They need connection. And we talk about what children need as being small, secure, and specific. Connection is small. It is not large. When we are placing children in a large campus and we assume that the staff is connecting with all of the children, many children slip through the cracks and never receive that personal connection that is so important to help them be able to recover from the past traumas of their life and be able to move forward. Connection is small. Environments need to be secure. Environments are what allows for that private space, that private place where children can come in and feel secure and be able to open up their heart to be able to deal with those past traumas. And once they're able to heal from their past, they're able to focus on the future. And finally, specific, there are no two children who are the same. Every child is unique and different. There are no two children who need the same thing. And so when we build a one-size-fits-all solution like a children's home, we're not able to respond to those particular needs that each children has. And this, the long-term impact of this is significant. We have to understand that children who don't form strong connections with a single adult when they are young will grow up to be adults who cannot form connections. And those adults who are not not able to form connections demonstrate sociopathic behaviors that are difficult. And so this connection issue is significant. And of course, we need to listen to the children. I went to a model children's home here in Costa Rica. We had a family that was going to pick up a baby, and the child, it was a government home that we were going to pick up the baby at. And the director, the regional director for PANI here in Costa Rica, our child welfare, asked me to come along to pick up the child. So we went with the family, we met the baby. It was a model home, beautiful, large, built and designed for children. Staff, great food, programming, all the things that the kids need. We played soccer with these two brothers, David and Daniel. And David takes care of his brother who has some developmental delays. And we played for an hour or so, picked up the baby, and with the family, we were leaving. David came running up to me, and as we were leaving, he said, "Phil, when can you come back with a family for me?" So he's living in the nicest children's home in Costa Rica, only 10 children in this home. And what the child welfare worker said is, "Phil, you can see, I could build a palace for each one of these children, but it's not what they want. These children want families." And so he said, "Please continue to develop your program." We need to listen to the kids. When we listen to the children answer the question for us. They want families. We don't just operate a children's home. We are willing to develop whatever program is necessary to help children or youth and develop in the best way they can long-term. So what does it look like to move toward family-based solutions for a children's home? It's that movement from an institutional model toward a family-like model, and then toward family-based models, and then toward permanent family. We always want to be pushing. We always want to be moving along that scale towards permanent family for the children. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what this has looked like for different organizations that have walked through transition processes. United for Christ is a children's home in Asunción, Paraguay. And in 2011, they had 220 children in what they describe as warehouses. I was told this is the most institutional program in all of Paraguay, and this program will never transition. It is because it's an established long-term program that's doing that. But these people, Christina in the center and her two staff people, went through a seminar and decided we want to change the way that we're doing this. And so individual people brought about this change. So let's skip forward from 2011 to 2022. They've closed their warehouses completely. They took those big buildings and they literally bought plywood and divided them into small house-like units. Today, they only have 75 children living in group homes in those campuses. They've reunified over 100 children with biological or extended families. They have 40 children in foster care, and they've seen 4 of those children adopted. They're walking through a process of transitioning their care from being institutional to being family-like, to pushing toward family-based and permanent family. United for Christ. Por los Niños is a program in Catacamas, Honduras. And in 2016, when I first came in contact with them, they had 40 children living in group homes. And they also went through a process. And here's Jose and Carla with my wife and I. Jose and Carla are the directors of this children's home. And they today do not have those children. They have 9 children living on their campus. They have 26 children who they've reunited with biological or extended families. They have 11 children in foster care and 81 families from the community that they're supporting. All right. It used to be that all of their focus was inside their campus, focused in on what they were doing with the children living on their campuses. But now they've turned their focus outward. They're supporting biological and extended families. They're supporting these 81 vulnerable families from their communities to prevent the separation. And they have children being cared for in foster care as well. These are the type of transitions that we're looking for. Here's another example. In 2019, we started working with Indian Christian ministries in and around Hyderabad, India. At that time, they had 500 children living in 75 pastor homes, with 5 to 10 children living in each home. They would build homes for the pastors, and they would put 5 to 10 children in with the pastor living in his home. All right. I'm going to skip forward. These are a couple of the people that were involved in this program in India. I'm going to skip forward just a couple of months. We're staying in the same year, 2019. It was only 12 months later. They had reunified 255 children back to their biological or extended families within 12 months from these programs, as they hired a team of social workers who began to go out and just try to find these families, and then began reunifying those children back with their biological families. That's half the kids. 100% of those children were family reunification. They were not even looking for foster care or adoptive care. It was all family reunification, because the children have primarily come into their home for reasons that were not justified, primarily reasons of poverty. We skip forward a couple of years to 2022, and because of the pandemic and the experience they had doing this, they have now reunified over 750 children back with their biological or extended families as they continue to work in this. It's more children than they original had. They actually have started supporting other orphanages, helping them reunify children back into their biological or extended family because of the expertise that they have. All right, that's what it can look like for children's homes to be actors that are making the transitions, expanding their care services. It's not just the orphanage that they're offering, but they're offering family reunification, fostering, and adoption as well. All right, I'm going to end with just 3 principles that I think are important. The first one is this: do not dismiss the church as an important actor in this work with caring for children. It's been one of our strong suits, as the church has engaged for vulnerable children when other people have not done it. And we have an incredible opportunity to continue doing that. When you talk in some of these circles, you will hear people say, it's the government that should implement foster care, that should implement adoption, and that should implement family reunification. But these are the same governments that have not historically been acting in the best interest of children. And we know that government makes a terrible parent. I would suggest that these children's homes, these orphanages that have been on the front line, that know the children, have an incredible opportunity to be the group that creates the new solutions, that step forward and creates these new solutions for children. The second one is this: the church and the government can work together. Now, the church has a moral responsibility to care for the vulnerable children in their communities. The government has a legal responsibility to care for the children in their communities. But they're the same children. We have a responsibility toward the children, and so we need to find ways to work together. And so I have 4 principles I just want to mention on that. The first one is, we need to, as the church, as the NGOs, honor and respect our local government for the difficult work that they have. The caseloads that the social workers and the government offices manages are impossible to manage, and they can do it right 99 out of 100 times and never get thanked. But that one case will make it on the nightly news and everybody is up in arms and wants to close child welfare. We need to honor and respect them. I remember at a dinner that we had for Casa Viva, our 6th anniversary, I asked the child welfare, the head of national protection, to speak at our event. She came to the event, and as I introduced her, I just thanked her for the work she's doing. I said that it was important work, that they're doing a great job. I don't even remember what I said, but she stood up and she was visibly stunned, and she paused at the beginning and she said, "I've been working in the government for 25 years in this work, and I think it's the first time that anyone has ever said thank you," was what she said. No one is honoring and respecting these. And instead, what I hear is, oh, our government's terrible, they'll never do it. As we're working for the good of our countries, we need to work for the good of child welfare. At the same time, we have to balance that with high standards. When we go into a government office, we write down a description. This is what Casa Viva is going to do, or our team of professionals, and this is what the government commits to do. And then we hold them to those high standards. What we found is the government does not mind that we're Christian as long as we are professional. And so when we are acting as professionals, then they can work on that. Number 3 is we have to have gatekeeping. We have to guard the gate. We have to make sure that the children coming into our programs actually need to be there. That's the number 1 problem with institutionally globally, is that children are coming into the institutions because of reasons of poverty, of lack of access to education. We need to find ways to support those families that are in vulnerable situations rather than separate those children from their own families. And then number 4, we have to push for the best long-term solution. And push is the right word, because the governments oftentimes they're so overwhelmed that they're content to place children in temporary foster care and just leave them there, or in temporary residential care and not come in and work with them. We need to push for family reunification. We need to shorten the timeframes that it's taking the judges to decide if this child should be reunified. We need to shorten the timeframe that it takes for children to be declared in abandonment so that they could be potentially adopted, because every child comes with a clock on their back, and that clock is ticking. The time for transition is now. It's not when children turn 17. It's not when children turn 18, because the children continue to look for opportunities to be cared for in families. And finally, number 3, we need to invite the churches and the religious and faith-based NGOs to a new way of caring for children. It needs to be as compelling as that beautiful orphanage dream. As we need to share the stories, we need to share the videos that Grit shared with us, so that we can see why children need to be back with their own biological families, and we can understand that. And it is an invitation. It is an invitation from a religious standpoint, from a Christian standpoint, to enter into a mystery. That mystery is in Matthew 18:5, where it says, "When you receive a child like this, you receive me," Jesus says. And Jesus is saying, I'm going to be present in this story when families open up their doors and receive children to walk among them. That invitation is the invitation to biblical hospitality.
1 minute, I'm sorry, I'm just going to intervene, but time is running. So 1 minute, it's time to wrap up.
1 minute, perfect. I'm on literally my last slide. That's perfect. So we need to celebrate the great work that has been done, that the churches have done. And we need to say the church can do more. The church can play a leadership role in the future of caring for children. And so I'll just end with a short story, which is a young boy, 15 years old, who was declared in abandonment, growing up in an orphanage. He'd been there since he was 6 years old, living in that orphanage. And he told the director of the home, "What I want is a family." A lady brought him into her home. And after just 6 months of being in that home, he was a child who was literally the worst child in the orphanage. They didn't think they'd ever find a family for him. But he came into that home, and he took his shirt off one day and laid on the lap of the lady that was caring for him. And for the first time ever, he showed someone the scars that were on his back from the abuses that he'd suffered. He said, I want you to touch my back. I want you to touch the scars on my back, because because those scars are the physical wounds that I suffered from the abuse. And I want you to feel them, they'll heal. But I want you to put your hands there, because there's scars like that that are still open in my heart. And I want your hands to heal the scars that are on my heart. Only family can do that. We need to find ways for children to be connected into family and give them what they most want. So thank you, Annika. I'm sorry that I went over a little bit of time, but it's a pleasure to share with you all today.
Thank you, Philip. It was so interesting and such an important message. So I think we will survive that you took a little longer time. And now we want to hear a case from Honduras, where Maria Luna will tell how they have worked more concretely with the transition from permanent to temporary residential care in Honduras.
My name is Maria Luna. I am from Honduras. And thank you very much to Annika, Grit, and Christina, the Child Protection Network in Denmark. Thank you for share this moment, this seminar. Thank you for the invitation. Now I will continue in Spanish because my English is not too good. Well, nuestra experiencia, este proceso de transición de pasar de un cuidado permanente, de protección permanente a los niños, a uno temporal, pues ha sido un camino largo y todo un proceso. Y todo inició escuchando las voces de niños y adolescentes especialmente, que estaban viviendo en los hogares infantiles. Y era algo que nosotros nunca, muchos líderes también, directores de hogares de niños, nunca imaginamos, porque no había tampoco mucho conocimiento sobre los conflictos que podían producir la institucionalización o crecer institucionalizado. Entonces era algo pues desconocido, y hubo como una voz de alerta cuando algunos jóvenes comenzaron a expresar cómo se sentían, qué hubiesen deseado. Por ejemplo, en la pantalla tienen algunos de las expresiones de ellos. Decían que no les hubiese importado ser muy pobres, no tener mucho, pero crecer con su familia, estar con su madre o con su familia. Y otros, como una joven, ¿verdad?, de uno de los hogares, ella incluso me preguntaba por qué, si había intención de apoyar a mi madre, ¿por qué no lo hicieron de otra manera? ¿Por qué no buscaron las formas de apoyarla sin necesidad de separarnos? Todas esas expresiones de los de más de 600 jóvenes que hemos escuchado nos llamaron la atención, y comenzamos a pensar, a indagar, comenzamos a hacer como un sondeo. No era un estudio profundo, pero fue un sondeo para investigar si todos los jóvenes que estaban viviendo en hogares infantiles tenían esos mismos sentimientos, vivían esas mismas angustias, incertidumbre, etc. Y el sondeo que realizamos pues nos demostró que sí, ¿verdad? Que era un sentimiento generalizado. Todos los niños y jóvenes deseaban vivir con sus familias. Y eso nos llevó a buscar otras alternativas, ¿verdad? Nos llevó a hablar inicialmente. Comenzamos a involucrar, pero básicamente hablando de persona a persona con los líderes de los hogares infantiles y a socializar un poco lo que era ese sentimiento, cómo se sentían los jóvenes. Y así fue como iniciamos. Ese fue nuestro primer paso, por así decir, comenzar a hablar a socializar, ¿verdad? La socialización con juntas directivas. Empezamos a crear algunas iniciativas sobre los procesos de transición de jóvenes y varias iniciativas y comenzamos a compartirlas, ¿verdad? Con algunos líderes. A veces fueron bien recibidas, al menos prestaron atención, pero a veces definitivamente fueron rechazadas, ¿verdad? Poco a poco fuimos aprendiendo un poco más, leyendo un poco más, escuchando, aprendiendo. Dicho sea de paso, agradecemos mucho a Casa Viva que nos apoyó también, nos dio mucho conocimiento en cuanto a todos estos procesos, nos indicó el camino justamente cómo debíamos de ir y así comenzamos. Inicialmente hablábamos con los directores o con los equipos técnicos de los hogares infantiles y nos dimos cuenta que no funcionaba porque las juntas directivas no apoyaban la idea ni los donantes. Entonces por eso comenzamos esa etapa de sensibilización con juntas directivas, con donantes y por supuesto directores y equipos técnicos. Y así fuimos involucrando a otras personas, a otras organizaciones, a iglesias, porque por lo general pues eran los hogares de niños, muchos operan bajo la sombrilla, por así decir, de una iglesia. Cuando ya teníamos un grupo, y en las fotografías ustedes pueden ver, ¿verdad? Hubieron muchas jornadas de socialización, muchas reuniones, y seguidamente fuimos cuando teníamos un grupo ya más o menos conformado, interesado en participar en toda esta temática de iniciar a desinstitucionalizar a la niñez, al menos buscar los medios, las estrategias. Entonces, comenzamos ese proceso de entrenamientos, ya unos entrenamientos un poco más profundos, como cursos completos de semanas, como talleres donde aprendieran a hacer planificaciones, y que aprendieran más sobre la temática, conferencias, tuvimos conferencias muy grandes con participación de incluso del gobierno, de operadores de justicia, tuvimos de juzgados de familia, tuvimos todos los actores juntamos en algunas conferencias. Y luego, cuando ya había mucho conocimiento, y esto es importante, a veces los líderes si quieren, piensan que la mejor manera de atender a los niños, de proteger a los niños, es a través de tenerlos ahí en una casa, en un hogar. Sin embargo, cuando tienen el conocimiento y se dan cuenta que hay otras formas de cómo protegerles, otras formas de cómo apoyarles, entonces en muchos casos no hay resistencia. El conocimiento es el principal motivador. Al menos así fue en nuestro caso, o así ha sido y es hasta el día de hoy. Cuando ya teníamos muchos líderes y muchas personas involucradas, empoderadas, con conocimiento, entonces estas mismas personas van replicando la experiencia, van hablando con otros líderes, van compartiendo la experiencia. En la foto del centro vemos ahí a uno de los pastores. Él era director de uno de los hogares de niños aquí en Honduras y luego lo vemos ahí, ¿verdad? Él está compartiendo de toda esa experiencia. Y es así como vamos, como ha sido el proceso de invitar a los hogares infantiles y cómo les hemos motivado. Luego nosotros continuamos, ¿verdad? Y ya el proceso de transición se dio se desarrolló dentro de los talleres. Cada hogar que decidió, que firmó un acuerdo, que firmó un convenio de interés para poder cambiar su filosofía de trabajo del modo tradicional a uno más amplio y de ser posible a uno transitorio. Entonces, cada uno de esos hogares elaboró un plan, ¿verdad? Le acompañamos para elaborar su plan de transición. Dentro de ese plan debían o incluyeron, por ejemplo, la diversificación del cuidado y de la protección del niño. Ya no solamente era mantenerlo en el hogar, sino que ya incluía otras formas, ¿verdad? Por ejemplo, algunos comenzaron a pensar en la prevención, en trabajar en las comunidades para prevenir que los niños llegaran al hogar y a trabajar también, fortalecer las escuelas, la educación y a través de ese programa educativo, entonces trabajar con los padres, con las madres de familia, porque generalmente son madres solas, y evitar que los niños salieran del hogar y fueran a una institución. Ese es como un ejemplo, pero hubieron otros ejemplos de muchas formas, ¿verdad? Que ya vamos a ver aquí también algunas. Luego también cada hogar desarrolló, o ese plan, perdón, incluía que debía de hacerse una revisión de cada caso, ¿verdad? Niño por niño, revisar expediente, revisar antecedentes, revisar si tenía familia y revisar absolutamente todo y elaborar un plan de vida incluyendo el plan de salida de ese niño si hay una oportunidad de salida. Entonces, luego la siguiente etapa fue la identificación de las familias. Una vez elaborado los planes y todo definido, eso toma bastante tiempo, todo ese trabajo. Entonces, una vez que se revisó todos los expedientes de niño, caso por caso, se elaboró un plan de vida por niño. Entonces, se comenzó con la búsqueda, y esta es una parte bastante fuerte, es un trabajo arduo, la búsqueda de familias biológicas. En los casos, la mayoría de los niños, como bien lo mencionó Philip, la mayoría de los niños tienen familia. Tienen padres, tienen madre especialmente, tienen abuelas, tienen tías, tienen esa familia extendida también. Entonces se comenzó con la identificación, la búsqueda, la investigación, porque habían familias que simplemente se habían desaparecido. Nos encontramos con casos en esta identificación de familias que no conocían de la existencia de esa niña o de ese niño, simplemente porque la mamá del niño dio a luz y desapareció y nunca dijo que había entregado un niño. Esos casos esos ejemplos fueron lindos porque finalmente esa adolescente se pudo reencontrar con su familia biológica gracias a esta búsqueda de familias. Y luego también comenzamos una tarea ardua en la búsqueda, en la preparación, todo planificación inicialmente, y luego la búsqueda de familias de acogimiento mayormente en las iglesias. Aunque todavía la ley no permitía, no había una aprobación de ley para hacer acogimiento familiar, quisimos tener las familias preparadas, capacitadas para cuando autorizaran la institución, cuando el gobierno autorizara para iniciar con el acogimiento familiar. Luego comenzamos algunas de las propuestas o iniciativas o estrategias, ¿verdad? Estrategias que desarrollamos para ese tema de desinstitucionalización, que no lo dije al inicio, pero esa palabra al principio era una palabra que no se podía mencionar en el país, no era bien recibida, y muchas veces pues nos veían muy mal, ¿verdad? Iniciando desde el gobierno. Me decían, pero es que esa palabra no puede mencionarla. Y a algunos directores tampoco no les gustaba esa palabra. Pero hoy por hoy es una palabra que logramos, sí, que se incluyera en nuestro lenguaje de país. Y entonces, algunas de las iniciativas que desarrollamos, de las estrategias, perdón, que desarrollamos fue la reintegración familiar. Sí me gustaría mencionar que en Honduras hace muchísimos años se comenzó desde el gobierno a hablar sobre reintegración familiar, pero luego esa iniciativa quedó un poco en el olvido, quedó como dormido. Y luego algunos hogares, ¿verdad? Recordaban de aquellas capacitaciones que dieron algo sobre reintegración familiar. Y entonces entregaban a los niños, pero los entregaban a algunos niños que su mamá quería volver a recuperarlos. Llegaba al hogar y decía, no, devuélvame a mi niño, ya no lo quiero tener ahí. Pero no había un proceso definido. No había nada, no había una preparación previa. Solamente entregaban a los niños y que le vaya bien. O sea, no se sabía si le iba bien o cómo era la experiencia. Entonces nosotros comenzamos aquí a plantear muchas cosas, ¿verdad? Dentro de estas estrategias, fortalecimos la reintegración familiar, hicimos varios talleres con equipos técnicos, hicimos planes piloto para buscar la mejor manera de reintegrar los niños, aquellos niños que tenían una posibilidad o que tienen una posibilidad de volver a retornar a su familia biológica, entonces que puedan tener esa oportunidad en la mejor manera y en el mayor interés de ese niño y la mayor conveniencia del niño. Desarrollamos también una estrategia para los adolescentes, los jóvenes, para la transición de ellos, porque también nos permitió darnos cuenta de que egresaban, salían de los hogares sin ninguna preparación. Y eso lo incluimos como una parte de la desinstitucionalización, porque algunos jóvenes, al no tener las herramientas para enfrentarse a la vida, simple y sencillamente decidían quedarse en el hogar. Y conocemos casos de jóvenes de 24, 30 y 50 años que prefirieron quedarse por siempre en los hogares. Desarrollamos una estrategia completa, toda una metodología con manuales, toda una guía para tutores, para llevar todo el proceso de formación y el proceso de salida de un joven. Luego también desarrollamos una serie de, además de las capacitaciones, de la formación, de involucrar a muchos actores, gobierno, sociedad civil, empresa privada. También apoyamos los hogares infantiles, miembros de Red Viva, los fortalecimos, los apoyamos para comenzar su proceso de acogimiento familiar, con muchos de ellos con mucho éxito. Recalco algo, no todos los hogares miembros de Red Viva entraron en este proceso. Hubieron quienes no se sintieron capaces de continuar, pero con los que lo hicimos hemos tenido mucho éxito. Aquí quiero comentarles justamente de algunos de los obstáculos a los que nos enfrentamos en todo este proceso. No, por supuesto, era algo relativamente nuevo y no es un proceso fácil, pero sí es posible, ¿verdad? Y muy satisfactorio. Y uno de los primeros problemáticas, por así decir, que enfrentamos, o desafíos que enfrentamos fue que algunos de los hogares que decidieron adoptar, ¿verdad? Cambiar esa filosofía de trabajo, enfrentaron crisis económicas, porque algunos donantes no estaban de acuerdo y se retiraron. Y tuvimos hogares donde sus juntas directivas se retiraron también porque no compartían esa visión. Entonces, ahí entre todos tuvimos que enfrentar esas crisis financieras. También algunos directores fueron despedidos de las organizaciones donde colaboraban, porque por la formación y el empoderamiento que tuvieron, ellos ya no compartían la idea de continuar institucionalizando niños. Entonces, sus propuestas, sus planes operativos iban enfocados a diversificar la atención, la protección, y tenían nuevas propuestas, y sus juntas directivas no las aprobaron, no estaban de acuerdo, y como ya no podían caminar juntos, entonces al final algunos directores, unos voluntariamente prefirieron salir de las instituciones y otros fueron despedidos. También algunos de los directores, por ejemplo, tenían temor de que mencionaban que los proyectos iban a desaparecer, que sus programas iban a desaparecer, porque si ya no habían niños, iban a desaparecer. Y ahí fue un poco un desafío, convencerles de lo contrario. A algunos los convencimos, a otros no logramos convencerlos. Y también algunos de los 3 de los hogares más grandes que eran miembros de Red Viva decidieron no continuar siendo miembros de Red Viva, ¿verdad? Se desafiliaron, por así decir, se retiraron porque ya no compartían esa filosofía de buscar familias para los niños, de que los niños, dar esa oportunidad a los niños de que crecieran, se desarrollaran en familia. Entonces simplemente tomaron la decisión de retirarse. Y por supuesto también enfrentamos muchos conflictos políticos, conflictos internos dentro de la institución rectora de la niñez y conflictos políticos a nivel nacional. Entonces por momentos nuestras propuestas se detenían un poco, pero nunca quitamos el dedo del renglón y continuamos y fortalecimos la sociedad civil en esta temática. La fortalecimos mucho y como una red, entonces continuamos aunque la institucionalidad estuviera detenida un poco.
Disculpe, María.
Sí.
Unos 2 minutos más, por favor. Sería tiempo para acabar. Gracias.
Sí. Entonces, ya continuamos, involucramos, por supuesto, caminamos con el gobierno y desarrollamos algunos materiales, algunas herramientas importantísimas. Ya mencioné un poco de la guía del manual para la reintegración familiar. Actualmente estamos en proceso para difundirlo y trabajarlo, capacitar en todos los orfanatos del país, junto a la DINAF, que es la institución rectora. También introdujimos algo, y es en lo que estamos todavía trabajando, pero ya desarrollamos lo que es una estrategia, por así decir, de certificación para aquellos pocos, esperamos que sean muy pocos centros que queden, y deseamos elevarlo a un nivel obligatorio, que sean certificados, que esos centros tengan los estándares mínimos de calidad en cuidado y protección de los pocos niños que esperamos que queden. Entonces desarrollamos todo ese portafolio para la certificación de los centros. Y algunas de los logros que tuvimos, ¿verdad? Y como ya mencioné, introdujimos la palabra desinstitucionalización, que era un pecado hablar de eso en el país. Ahora DINAF nombró su programa con ese nombre. También creamos esos puentes de diálogo entre sociedad civil y gobierno, la certificación de los centros que ya mencioné, y también estamos todavía trabajando mucho para cuidando, como quien dice, la puerta, para que la DINAF y los jueces no continúen enviando niños a los hogares infantiles, sino que agoten las otras alternativas, y que enviar a un niño a un hogar infantil sea la última alternativa. Y algo fantástico que hemos visto es que sí se ha reducido, pero muy significativamente, la niñez institucionalizada, al menos en un 42% se ha ido reduciendo. Con esto finalizo y no sé si tienen alguna consulta, alguna pregunta. Si no hay preguntas ni consultas, agradezco mucho su atención y espero que nuestra experiencia en Honduras pueda inspirar a todos los aquí presentes. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Maria Luna. I think people are coming back in this room now, hopefully. Yes, good to see. So we had planned for us to go into group discussions now, but I think because of time, we will do it as a plenary discussion. And I think you have maybe already had a lot of questions on your mind and different considerations that we would like to hear from you. So we would like to hear from you what challenges and opportunities you see for faith-based institutions in surpassing from permanent to temporary residential care in your context. Also, if you have some feedback or you have some reflections, you're very welcome to share it. I'll just unshare my screen again, if I can. Stop sharing. So the way we can do it is that you can either write in the chat a question or you can raise your hand. And then Philip and Maria Luna and Grit, they are available to provide answers. So who is the political advisor at CKU? We are a pool fund and we have a window for freedom of religion and belief where we grant projects in this field, and the Philippines are expert on this subject. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you very much, and thank you for a warm welcome and interesting conversation and interesting presentations here. My name is Philip, and as Annika mentioned, I'm a political advisor in CKU. I used to work as a project consultant here as well, and do have some experience both from my work here, but also before that with different kinds of care, alternative care and institutionalized children as well. So it's very interesting for me both to listen into the conversation that you guys are having and to think what does freedom of religion and belief mean in this relation. First of all, I understand that Annika has mentioned that I'm a rather theoretical guy in my approaches to things, and it's not a problem for me because theoretical and practice, for when you are a theoretical thinker like me, that's the same thing. Practice and theory is the same. Of course, I'm also aware that that's not the case when you come out and visit different homes and facilities around in the field. But let me start and with a question to all of you. So if you would please turn on your cameras, each one of you, because now I need to be able to see you all and see what you're doing. The question is, what does freedom of religion and belief protect? Does it protect all the major religions such as Christianity, Islam, Hinduism? Or does it protect all religions, also the smaller ones, indigenous religions? So everybody will think that freedom of religion and belief protect only the major religions such as Christianity, Islam and Hinduism. You put up your hands like this. Those of you who think that freedom of religion and belief protects all religions, also the smaller ones, you put up your hands like this. So now it's time to do whatever you think is right. Good, thank you very much. And I even saw that some people were looking at some of the others to see who voted what and when and how. I would like a comment for one of you who did like this, said that freedom of religion and belief protects all religions. Just to share what your thoughts were. And then later on, I would like one of you who did like this. So, Chrissy, if I may, I saw that you did like this. Why?
Well, I think I come from both a theoretical and a practical. So I have worked with many different indigenous groups and people with many different religions and faiths and faiths within faiths. But also I work in theory, so I work a lot with UN human rights treaties, and they do not discriminate. We should not discriminate. It is about, when we say freedom of belief, that is whatever belief you may have, religious or otherwise. So that's why I put up two hands.
Thank you very much. Rita, I saw that you did like this first and then you changed to this. Was that intentional, or was that because you were in some kind of doubt, or was it just unclear?
I was on the same one as Chrissy. It was yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry, you're all wrong, actually. This was a trick question. Freedom of religion and belief does not protect religion. It does not protect the gods of people. It protects human beings. It's a human right. And this is an important point when it comes to talk about freedom of religion and belief and alternative care, because this is not about an institution of religious organizations or protection of ideas of some people. They may be atheistic, or they may believe in a transcendent God or something like that. That is not what freedom of religion and belief is about. It's about protecting the human being. And in this case, it's about protecting the children. So this is an important point that we need to bear in mind. And it's also an example that the right to freedom of religion and belief actually is one of the human rights that we see is most misunderstood. We all think that we have an idea what is this right about, and when it comes down to it, we don't, and we follow our first intention and say, well, this is actually it. It is also one of the rights that is being not being prioritized in international development cooperation, in international human rights work. We see that it's a right that is also misused by certain groups. It can be Christian groups that misuse the right to promote their specific religion, not to promote them as people who have the right to do whatever they or believe whatever they want to. So therefore, it's important when we discuss freedom of belief and belief that we are aware of what is the right about, what does it protect, and who does it protect, and how. So I will use a couple of minutes to just in detail go through what does the right to freedom of belief and belief protects, and then we will discuss it in relation to alternative care. Let's see, let me share my presentation here. Let's see. Where is there? Now you should only be able to see my presentation, right? Please give me a thumbs up if that's the case. Yes, thank you very much. Let's skip through these. Freedom of belief and belief is the right that protects human beings and their right to have, to change, or not to have a religion or belief. Or belief in this sense also means atheistic beliefs, humanistic beliefs, indigenous beliefs, animist beliefs. So it covers all kind of beliefs and thought you might have. It is also the right to manifest your religion or your belief. And it's just like Chrissy said in her comment earlier on, it's protection from discrimination based on religion or belief or lack thereof. Furthermore, freedom of belief and belief also protects the rights of the parents and children. In this relation, it's important to be aware that actually freedom of belief and belief gives parents the right to raise their children within the belief or within the religion they find right. And the children, they also have the right to freedom of belief and belief. So when they grow to a certain point of maturity, they can themselves, and the state is obliged to take care that the children, they can decide for themselves what religion they should adhere to or belong to. So that means that it is actually the state's role to make sure that children at a certain age can choose religion or belief for themselves, or choose to change their religion and belief. Freedom of religion and belief also protects your right to conscientious objection, meaning, for instance, from military service or from receiving blood. As we know, many Jehovah's Witnesses, that's a part of their belief that they cannot receive blood. Other people, pacifists, they think being a part of the military is such a huge leap that is against my beliefs, my thinking. So they have the right to conscientious objection in that relation. And the last thing is that the right to freedom of belief and belief also sets out some boundaries for how can you limit freedom of belief and belief. The first part of having and changing a belief or religion, that's an absolute right that cannot be touched. But when it comes to practice your religion, when it comes to manifest your religion, when it comes to parents' rights or the children and children's right in relation to the parents, there you can have some limitations in freedom of belief and belief. I won't go into detail to those limitations, but just let you know that they are there. When we look at the Convention on Rights of the Child, you have a number of articles that is actually relating to freedom of religion belief, and it's one of the conventions within the whole human rights spectrum where these things are expressed the most. So you see here that Article 2 is around discrimination, and that you're not allowed to discriminate people based on their religion, based on their belief, expressed opinions, and so on.
Felix, sorry, I don't think we see your presentation. We can only see the first slide, so I don't know if there's some technical.
There is. Thank you so much for letting me know. Let's see. Do you see what do you see now?
We see the first slide, freedom of religion and belief, and then we can see the coming slides in the side.
I think
Sorry about this.
What you should do, Philip, is share the presentation rather than the PowerPoint. So when you open the presentation, you go to Zoom and then you share that.
Yeah, now I think it's better. Yes, now we can see it.
Very good. So you missed these slides, but that's okay. Hopefully you will be able to have a look at them later. So Article 2 is about discrimination, that all children, they shouldn't be discriminated against due to their religion or belief. And the same thing adhere to the religion or belief of the parents or the caregiver. When we move a bit further down in the different articles relating to religion or belief, you see in Article 14 that the states and parties shall respect the rights and duties of the parents and, when applicable, legal guardians to provide direction to the child in the exercise of his or her right in a manner consistent with the evolving capacities of the child. And this is a key point when we talk about being religious actors or non-religious actors who is involved in the spectrum of alternative care, because the state is obliged to provide these rights for the children that adhere to their expressed religion or belief. So when you heard before Philip mentioning the example from a Catholic girl being a part of a Protestant family, where they took care for her to be a part of practicing, manifesting her religion as a Catholic, that was an example of the family actually taking into account the religion or belief of the child. And this is something that we, in many cases, do see challenges with, because when I've been traveling in for instance, in India and Nepal, we've seen orphanages run by Hindus or run by the states, and therefore with Hindu rituals as a part of the way the orphanages they're being run. So there you will have Muslim kids, you will have Christian kids who become a part of a religious rite where they have to greet the sun in the morning, or you will go into an orphanage or one of the institutions or whatever families on the alternative care spectrum who will include the children in need of the alternative care in different rites and rituals of a certain religion and belief. Can also be girls who are being forced to wear hijab, or girls who are being forced not to wear hijab because now they're in a Christian home or they're in a secular home, and they're not supposed to show those kind of signs of religion. And that is actually against the Convention on the rights of the child. So I have put up here another one from Article 20, where it also relates to the obligation of the alternative caregiver to do that in continuity of a child's upbringing. That means that actually we who work with the spectrum of different kinds of alternative care instruments, we do have an obligation also to make sure that, well, this child was raised as a Christian, as a Muslim, as a Hindu, or as an animist or something else, and to make sure that the facilities or the alternative care that we provide for them is in a continuity with the child's upbringing. This is actually key, because I haven't seen many institutions or alternative caregivers who are able to accommodate these kind of things. I've seen examples that are good ones, but most often I see that, well, we are secular, so we don't do religion here, and that means that the children, they can't actually practice their religion, and they are not being able to do it, to give care to the children in continuity with their upbringing. And that's really an issue that I think that is important for all of us to be aware of and to take into account. Taking the time into consideration, I will skip some of these, but you will have the slides afterwards for your reference. A question, and I hope that we can discuss this and have an opportunity to do it, just all of us. A question is, how do we respect, protect, and promote freedom of religion and belief in our work, both with institution and other foster care, other alternative care instruments? Another question or balance that we need to make is to ask ourselves the question, when is a child mature enough to take its own decisions? Some countries we will say that, well, that would be after 15. Others, they will say, well, as long as you're talking about a child, they should just do as the parents or the legal guardian tells them to do. But actually that's against the Convention of the Rights of the Child, because they should be able to make those decisions themselves when they have the evolving capacity to do so. So the question, when is a child mature enough to take their own decision, and how do we accommodate those alternative or those decisions in the alternative care that we provide for them? And how do we make sure that institution, foster care families respect, protect, and promote the child's rights to freedom of religion and belief in order in line with the religion or belief of the parents?